All right, everybody, welcome to the next episode of the PropTech Genius Show. And today's genius is Dan Lewkowicz. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, so you get called a genius daily, right? Is that what happens in your
Of,
line of work?
of course, absolutely. I get called other things too.
Well, it happens. Well, you get on our show and we flatter you. We call you a genius,
Yep.
all those fun things. Yeah. So you're in the hot seat. You're in the genius hot seat today. We get to interview you, talk about your fun story, what you're doing, and all those great things that you're seeing. It's so much fun in commercial real estate land at the moment. So much fun. Not, but I get it. But it's always a good time. We can reflect on kind of where it's going, what we're doing. So it'll be very cool. But I don't need to say anything. You can tell everybody kind of who you are, what you're doing, all those great things. So take it away, Dan.
Yeah, Dan, again, thank you so much for having me on. I'm Dan Lewkowicz, a senior director here at Encore Real Estate Investment Services. I am a net lease investment sales broker. What that means is that I help sellers and buyers transact on commercial property nationwide and specifically net lease properties. So that would be pretty much broken into two different buckets. Number one would be your single tenant net lease properties. That would be your Wendy's, your Walgreens, your Chipotle, your Chick-fil-A, your Starbucks, etc. One tenant, one building, in most cases, zero expenses for the landlord. The other side that I specialize in is shopping centers, so multi-tenant retail or multi-tenant retail and office, which can be found in any city all over the country. So I
Right.
help, like I said, buyers and sellers transact. I provide advisory services for them, as well as developers who are, looking to buy things, buy land and develop or redevelop existing structures, and they need that insight about what to do and what an exit might look like.
Ah, very, very cool. All right. So for the listeners, what you're hearing in my noise is there's a storm coming outside. And so, it is what it is. Just FYI. You hear all the rustling. It's all the stuff happening. So we're about to have a major storm come through.
Oh no.
Austin, Texas. It's so special. All right, very cool. All right, back to I squirrel. I do that all the time. I call it squirreling. Okay, so let's talk about because you're on two ends of the spectrum, right? Where it's so I'm talking from a prop tech perspective. Like you've got your lease really governs like who cares about what in the spaces that you're managing, right? Or you're leasing.
Well, so I'm selling the spaces, but yes, the lease absolutely governs what responsibilities the owner or landlord has and what
Right.
responsibilities the tenant has.
Yeah, and so I find it quite interesting from all the climate tech and clean tech and prop tech around building performance that, one of the probably use case that it's really not chasing is those triple net leases, right? Because the tenants will kind of care. They're going to kind of care unless they have an ESG mandate, like if it's somebody like that really, really cares about the space, but it's usually like, unless it's broken, I'm not going to fix it. And the landlords, as long as you don't burn my building down, I don't really care. Right. So it's really kind of an interesting dynamic around, there's some tenants who have a huge ESG initiative like 7-Eleven and
Chipotle.
Walgreens and Chipotle and people like
Yeah.
that. So they care about the environment and care how their buildings are impacting their carbon footprint. But not every retailer is like that, right? And so I find it quite interesting in that whole environment, and I'd like to get your take on. So if it's truly tenant driven, what are you seeing as far as I know that what I've heard is like initially like when they're signing the leases, they have to force the landlord to make like certain improvements, right? Because they want to minimize that impact. But what other initiatives are you seeing
So
from?
it's going to depend a lot on the scenario. So in a typical, build to suit developer deal, a developer comes in, they buy the land, they ink a lease with, whatever national tenant you want to use in the example, and they come up with, what design and everything down to the color of the plates on the light switches, right? So if
Okay.
that tenant has a strong, ESG motivation, then that's going to be, kind of worked out in that initial build out that or build to suit that the developer is doing. Usually those developers churn, right? They're not building and developing to hold, they're building and developing to flip. So a
Right.
new owner like yourself, for example, would come in and have absolutely no say in anything because you're buying an existent building, existent land, as well as existent terms on the lease. And pretty much anything that's going to go on during, from an ESG perspective is going to take place in that initial development. I mean, with the exception of, it's a total remodel and the tenant, again, very tenant driven, tenant and franchise driven. The tenant might say, well, we've got a franchise agreement with Wendy's or Burger King, or insert whatever tenant you want in there, and this is the current new prototype. It has to have solar cells, it has to have this many parking spots, and this much many cars have to be in the stack, and this many lanes in the drive through. So it does happen after ownership, but again, at that point, once that lease is inked and the original building is built, the landlord really doesn't have much say in the matter, to be frank with you.
Interesting. Yeah, it's super crazy. I think, so are you seeing more and more tenants embracing or looking at like sort of building performance and I would assume so, because in this inflationary environment, their utility costs must be just eating them alive. Like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, listen, it's I think I'm reading about it, that's for sure. I'm reading about Chipotle's, initiatives to become more, carbon friendly, if you will. I think most of the national tenants aren't, it's not on their immediate radar for what's being built today, maybe in the future.
yep,
But obviously, like anything, have to do a cost benefit analysis, right? The cost to have a build that's carbon neutral or closer to it is going to be substantially higher than the cost to just go with the status quo. So the question is really, at what point are they going to be paid back? Because I believe, from a corporation perspective, you can
mhm,
call it right or wrong, but it just is, dollars drive decisions. So if it's
right,
something that ultimately, or it's going to, qualify for more, benefits, okay, great. That's one thing. Now, what I will tell you is that from a development perspective, there are some interesting loan products available. There are some C-PACE loans that
mhm,
allow owners to take advantage of different upgrades to their utility systems to make them more energy efficient, and to be able to then get credits and get loans to offset those costs. So I'm
right.
definitely seeing that. I've got some close friends that are in the C-PACE financing sector, and there's definitely a lot of exciting things going on there, and a lot of opportunity for owners who want to recoup some of their costs or get loans that are secured, so to speak, after renovations of that type.
Yeah, no, I like CPACE a lot. I know it's not in every market. It's in most of the major markets,
Yeah.
right? So it's really kind of dependent on which market. So it's not, universally available, but I do like it. If you're in a market that has CPACE, you really should kind of look at that as an
Yes.
option to offset your development costs, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, it's going to lower your costs in general. Typically, any sort of green improvement is going to lower your overall costs. So yeah. Um, dude, get off. All right, this is life, y'all. And I'm just saying, I got a little kid in my room and he's being noisy. So there you go. And I don't edit. I don't edit. So it's really kind of funny. All right. So there we go. We'll keep going. So this is awesome. All right. So tell me about like for the since we're at Prop Tech Council, right? So tell me about the tech that y'all use from a brokerage standpoint. I mean, has there been any new developments in any sort of technology?
Sure,
Uh,
absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
we use technology all over. I mean, obviously from the basics of just your standard, Outlook and messaging and this and that, all the way up to a software like Build Out, which allows us to input certain data and then press a button and it spits out a 15 or 20 page offering memorandum that looks really nice. Yeah, so that's just in the day to day, where most of us are running with CRMs, that allow us to manage not only our contacts but to manage our pipelines. I found that the longer I'm in the business, the less I depend on the CRM, just because so much is kind of coming in at me. So for better or worse, I've noticed that as a trend amongst people that are very busy and have been in the industry for a long time.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on with AI. I mean, we've just
Yeah.
discovered some interesting tools that allow us to. I haven't used them, but some of my colleagues have. They allow
Yeah.
us to do, take a lease, a 50, 100, 150 page document, and press a button and it'll spit out a lease abstract, something that would take half an hour or an hour or more now could be done
Right.
with the click of a button. So that's cool. I myself, and I guess for better or worse, I like to just be transparent. I give away all my secrets, but hopefully it helps somebody else. But I myself do a lot of mailers, right? So I don't do it so much anymore, but I did a lot of cold calling when I was newer in the industry.
Mhm.
Recently I've done a lot of mailers,
Yeah.
postcards to owners, Like
Yeah.
I've sold a lot of shopping centers in a specific neighborhood. So I put a picture of all of them on a mailer and have that sent out. That's all automated. I just upload the design and the contact list. They do everything. But the reason I bring this up is that there's some other avenues that I'm investigating right now for like call centers, for example,
Right.
to leverage call centers to help create inbound leads. I have colleagues that are utilizing AI. They're programming
Yeah.
AI to make AI assisted calls where, they're calling out thousands of people every day with an initial conversation and collecting information, and then a real live broker reaches out to them. I always say that, if I pick up the phone and I notice accents from certain countries, I automatically know it's a telemarketer, and I don't want that for my business, right? So there's kind of a fine balance between leveraging new technologies and not, doing it in a way that's going to turn off your client base.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know that there's a lot of AI that it handles a lot of the inbound lead generation, like the people kicking the tires, kind of filtering through who's really a lead and who's not a lead,
Yeah,
and doing the initial qualification of your lead, right? That there's a lot of AI around that. And depending on how they want to communicate via text, via email, via phone, whatever it might be, it can all be kind of handled by AI. So that's
yeah,
really super cool and helpful, especially because you just want to be more productive, right? So if it's
right.
you're just getting them the information they need, then who cares about how they're getting it, right? It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
you at 2 a.m. So you
yeah,
can have this AI person handling it 24/7 in any language, right?
right,
You
right.
handle it, right? That's super cool.
Yeah,
So I find that super useful. I think I know another broker friend of mine that was using AI, but he was using using Cherry's data, and he was using it to basically they had an AI component on top of Cherry's data where they could predict when a transaction was going to have to be sold. Like they were getting really good. It was on the multifamily side because he's a multifamily broker, but he was using the data and they were building out this engine and they could predict like something was going to have to happen at some point in time with this property,
that's
right? So it
fascinating.
helped out. Yeah, it's super fascinating. So that as a broker, you can you know, invest your time on stuff that's really real, right? Instead of having to, guess. So
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. But I think that over time it's just going to get better. Like there can
yeah,
be
it will
tools like
for
that.
sure. And
Yeah.
then there's definitely a lot of tools out there. I mean, I personally, I don't know, of all the brokers in the country in my space, I'm probably one of the most active on LinkedIn. That's where
Yeah.
I generate a lot of business and make a lot of connections. That's how we met. So
Yeah.
I like to leverage that technology because for me, the old school method is important, right? One to one, pick up the phone. At most, I'm talking to one person. I might not even get them. But if I make, I made a post last week that had 70,000 views, right? I could make a video that could have 50,000 views. That's
Right.
50,000 people seeing my message. So I
Right.
love that. And then, in reference to what you said, I'm a little bit weary in certain senses about too much technology. I mean, I look at what's happened over the last decade with the residential space with Zillow and Trulia and lawsuits and all these different things, and they just had some major rulings in the court system that are going to affect agents. And I look at commercial real estate, and I don't think that we're going to be subject to the same algorithm that residential was, right? It's not that difficult. You're essentially just running comps, and most houses are very similar to each other. Whereas in the commercial space, if you look at one Wendy's and another Wendy's, they could be, one could have 1 year left on the lease, one could have 19 years, one could be doing $1 million
Yeah.
in sales, one
Yeah.
could be doing 2.5 million. And unless you are the broker with that data and that lease and those sales reports, you can't really place a value on the building. So I'm not that worried that we're going to be replaced in the commercial side. If I was a
Right.
residential agent, I'd be running to commercial right now for a lot of
Yeah.
reasons.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I do like, I don't want to see the human component removed. I don't think it's good for anyone in the industry. And I
Mhm.
mean, if you're dealing with, 15-year bonded, CVS leases or something like that, then you can click a button and order two or three of them, right? But aside
Yeah.
from that, I think it is hard for, transactions to take place. I mean, I saw an interesting product recently that someone was pitching me on where they have a platform that allows them to collect all the due diligence material up front, present the property in, so to speak, like click and buy type format, and
Mhm.
or submit an offer, and the buyer can have access to all the due diligence. And the moment that they kind of click the button and sign the DocuSign contract, their money's non-refundable and they're going to proceed to closing. It's interesting to me, but at the same time scary because again, I don't want to get rid of the human component, but I do think that we're going to have some significant change over the next, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I think most professions just become AI enabled, right? I mean, you're going to have, or tech enabled, whether it's AI or some other sort of tech or some data platform or something that it might not even be AI, right?
Enabled is different than replaced though, right?
Yeah,
I think that's
exactly.
the
Oh,
concern.
yeah. Yeah, no, I think, but I think some jobs will probably go away, but I think for very complex things like commercial real estate, it's not going to, right? There's
Yeah,
just, there's going to be too much local tribal knowledge that AI can't
yeah,
will nor will ever know, and nor can it find it, right? I mean,
right.
AI is only as good as the data it's using.
Yeah, it's true.
So, so but I think you can, I think a lot of the mundane tasks, the automation around that, that's AI's, shining
Yep,
moment,
no
right? And,
doubt.
look, I don't want to respond to 150 phone calls, like, and let AI do it, right? And that's super cool. And then you get involved when you need to get involved. And so I think as long as it, you have to supervise it in a way to make sure that
Right.
it's doing the right things. But yeah, I know, I think it, I don't think it's going away. I think it's here to stay. And I think we
Yeah.
need, how we embrace it and how we use it and to help us, not hurt us. I think that that's kind of some of the interesting things. But yeah, I can't imagine somebody like putting down hard money on a property all like at the click of a button and that like and it like and
And if
then
you
they're
have what you need, right? If you have a phase one environmental and you have an Alta survey
yeah,
and you have the lease, like why not? If you can, because
yeah,
essentially they're doing the due diligence up front before they click the button.
yeah, but you still have to do a physical building inspection or they don't do those.
I mean, it's done, definitely done with shopping centers for sure.
Yeah.
But with your average triple net Wendy's or Walgreens, it definitely doesn't have to be done. Now,
Yeah.
what I will tell you is that like I've met clients at buildings before and they've like wanted to get up on the roof or wanted to like look around. And I've
Mhm.
said to them, I said, you're gonna get a report with pictures and explanation that will be far more valuable to you than what your own two eyes see because
Yeah.
you're a novice, right? And you've got a professional here.
Yeah.
So I think that if these, for example, in the service that I was mentioning, if they had a property condition report from a reputable company, I
Yeah.
think that's enough to rely on for a lot of people.
Oh, well, that's true. I mean, so in typical triple net lease, they're responsible for parking lots, roofs, foundations, and camp, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot they're responsible for, right?
And
As
in
far-
absolute triple net lease, yes, the tenant
Yeah.
is responsible for everything. Now, I will tell you, I sold absolute triple net CVS last year, and I'm not going to get into too many details, but essentially, there were only a couple of years left on the lease, and we knew that CVS was not going to exercise their option. In fact, they had tried to get out of this one, so that everyone knew that. But when the buyer went to do a site visit, they did conduct a property condition assessment. And even though it was an absolute triple net lease, they found like $275,000 in deferred maintenance because CVS knew they weren't staying and they started
Yeah.
just not doing things. The owner was local, but he hadn't been to the property in 25 years, which was a mistake, right? So
Right.
what he ended up doing was giving the buyer a price reduction. There wasn't time to negotiate with CVS to get it closed. So I tell my clients, even if you have an absolute triple net building, if you're not going to visit it, I don't have any problem with that. But every 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, spend the $700 or $1,000 and get a property condition assessment so that
Right.
you can then look at that report and say and have a simple one-page letter drafted up that's sent to your tenant saying, pursuant to section XYZ of the lease,
Right.
you are in default. You have 30 days to make these repairs because that's going to save you a lot of problems down the road. And we see it all the time, unfortunately, even with triple net leases.
Yeah, 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 for sure. So let's talk about the shopping mall side of the business. I just, it's funny. I was just on a call with Ethan from Placer AI,
Oh,
right?
okay. Very cool.
Yeah. And so they do a lot. Obviously, they're in retail land and that's kind of their gig. And we were having this real heart, conversation about everybody thought malls were dead, but they're not dead, right? I
No,
mean, they're still
no.
around and people still like going to them. They're just changing the way they operate. But at the end of the day, they're still there and people still go visit them. And so it's interesting to see. I would like to know, because you're a broker, on like I mean, I never, some of the malls I've heard closed down, but there's still some very, very active malls in New York,
Yes.
Stephen,
So
right?
I mean, listen, first of all, to clarify, so I was at a premier top mall in the Midwest yesterday and just looking at the bustling traffic. That's not what I'm talking about. We can
Yeah.
definitely discuss malls, but in terms of what I sell your neighborhood shopping center. So
Yeah.
call it something from 5,000 to 200,000 square feet,
Yeah.
anchored or unanchored, the place that you go to, do your nails and get a massage and
Yeah. Shopping center.
pick up some Chinese food and all those things. So what I will tell you is that, like, there's always been misconceptions in the world, but we live in an era today where fake news is rampant. And it boggles my mind how many times I still to this day hear retail is dead, shopping centers are dead,
Um,
outdoor malls are dead. And it couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, what I like to do, like, that's an opinion, right? I like to argue against opinions with facts. Here's a fact. Today, we have an 18-year historic low in retail vacancy nationwide of 4.1%. That
yeah.
means that if you look nationwide, almost 96% of all retail spaces are occupied right now. That does not tell me that retail is dead. That tells me that retail is doing better than it's done in the last 20 years. That's number one. Number two, from a brokerage perspective, what I'll tell you is that everybody knows our market was on fire for years and years and years and years.
Right.
And really what happened, it's very simple, right? The powers that be really only have two different forces or levers that they can utilize to influence and manipulate, if you will, the economy. Number one, printing money. We saw that in an unprecedented manner with 10 trillion plus dollars printed in the span of less than probably 18 months and infused into the economy, right? Today, we are dealing with the aftermath and the fallout of that, right? Because when you print more dollars, you have more supply, right? What happens? Things become more expensive, right? That's just how the system works. That's why we're dealing with inflation. Now, as a reactionary result of that, the Federal Reserve changed interest rates. Now, they didn't just change them, okay? They changed them faster, more rapidly, and more aggressively than they have in the last 40 years. The federal funds rate went from effectively zero to now it's 525, 550 basis points. So 5.25 to 5.5. So let's just be conservative and say that they raised the federal funds rate 525 basis points, 5.25%. Okay. Now it's not in lockstep with actual real interest rates because interest rates aren't just based on the federal funds rates, they're based on treasuries as well. So if you look at interest rates went from about 2.75% all the way up to about 7.5%, right? At the culmination. So what is that? That's 4.75%. So what happened was the borrowing costs, even for net lease, even for the cream of the cream products that were trading at 4.5 or 5% return, 4.5 or 5 cap, you could get debt at 2.75%. So you got a nice spread there, right? A nice delta between your borrowing costs and your return, right? So that's healthy. That's why the market was on fire. Now, when interest rates went all the way up to 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5, now they've come back down 6.75, 7%, call it 7%. That 4.5 or 5% deal doesn't make much sense, right? From a leverage perspective, unless you're doing very low leverage or you're buying cash, it doesn't make sense. So all of these people that were buying and doing that arbitrage, borrowing at 2.75, buying at 5 or 6 or whatever it was, right?
Right.
They are now taken out of the market. But if
Mhm.
you notice what happened, shopping centers always traded at a higher cap rate, 6, 7, 8% or more. And they've kind of pushed up a little bit, not much, believe it or not. But if you look at net lease, those cap rates have moved maybe 50, maybe 75, maybe 100 basis points relative to almost 500 basis points of interest rate swing. Now,
Right.
in shopping centers, they've moved too, not much, but you can buy a great shopping center for 7, 7.5, 8, 9, 10%, right? I just sold a 9 cap shopping center, and the borrower got debt at like 675. Okay, so that makes sense. So that's what that has done, Amy, is that's pushed more people into the shopping center space because they have that delta. Now, as an aside, that delta is probably the most important variable to analyze, understand, and pay attention to if you're looking at the health and speed of the commercial real estate market. The
Right.
greater that delta, the more volume you're going to have because people have access to capital to make their deals make sense.
Right, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And then for those people who don't understand cap rates, that basically is how you evaluate your deal. And so you use your cap rate and divide your NOI and come up with a valuation that makes sense. And then your mortgage will come in there and it all, but that's kind of a ratio we all look at. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's super cool. We had um and that phenomenon I didn't realize was taking place, because that's really, really interesting, because I didn't even think about that. But my buddy Jeff Brand with Brand Partners, he's in Dallas. He owns that, all he's ever owned is Class B, Class C strip malls. Like that was his gig,
Nice.
and they have made so much money. And he is just like, he's like going, yeah, you multifamily people, I know you think you're like cool as crap, because I'm making the same returns as you.
Yeah.
And I have less work. And I'm like,
Right.
oh, okay, Jeff. All right, Jeff, I got you. I got you, dude.
I
It's
would agree.
yeah, no, it's very cool, for sure. And but it's a different, obviously a different management model. It's a little less, maintenance on the
Yep.
management side of it, but there's still nuances to it that you have to figure out for sure.
Sure.
But
Sure.
yeah, no, it's very cool. So, as far as the strip centers go, and as far as what you're seeing from a kind of a brokerage perspective, blah, blah, blah. There you go. No, I give up. From a brokerage lens. There we go. I found the word. Okay, that's not the word I wanted, but I got you. What are you thinking in the next kind of, because the inflation, the rates are going to stay the same, right? It's not going to change. The Fed came out like, I don't know, like a couple weeks ago, and they're basically, one of the Fed chairs just says, we're not moving it. We're going to keep it where it's at for the rest of the year. Like, good luck. Sorry, y'all. Peace out. We're not moving it. Just based off of what they're kind of seeing, is it's going to stay where it's at for probably the rest of this year. So what do you think that does for, it's probably going to push more people chasing your product, right? I mean, if there is that product, they're probably going to be chasing it if it's available. You're going to become the darling that, multifamily was at one point, and industrial was at one point, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, shopping centers are the darling of commercial real estate right now, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I will tell you that, you know, listen, the fact that the commercial real estate market is still moving and transactions are still happening, despite all of this change in interest rate, tells me that we're dealing with a healthy market. Because the reason it was slowed down, it wasn't slowed down naturally. It was slowed down because of an artificial, so to speak, variable, that lever of interest rate change being pulled so hard, hard enough to break things, right? So, I personally believe, being that we're in an election year, I think that the administration, from their eyes, they want to declare a victory on inflation, and they want to declare and whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But they want
Yeah.
to declare a victory on inflation, and they want to declare, hey, this hard time is ending. We're going to start easing things. I still believe that we'll see one or two interest rate decreases. One of them being before the November election. I think that it's pure politics, whether it's right or wrong.
Interesting.
Maybe I am wrong. Maybe we'll see things staying the same. It's not
Yeah.
what we had hoped for. It's not what we were told. It seems to be a moving target, and it's getting
Yeah.
kind of frustrating. But
Yeah.
I think that we can sustain it. I just believe that once we start seeing two or more rate decreases, it's going to add a whole hell of a lot of fuel to the fire. And the commercial real estate market is strong. It's under as much duress as you could put it under, and it's still moving. So once
Yeah.
that duress is lifted to a certain extent, I believe things are really going to take off.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest hurdle right now is the loan maturities that are all coming due right now, this year, next year, right? There's a lot of people with 3-year, 5-year debt that they're underwater. They're based on their loans. And so they're going to either have to buy into their refis or sell and take a haircut, right? One of the two. And so I think there's going to be some unique financial products that come out because of that very reason, right? There'll be a lot of mezz and a lot of bridge and a
Yeah.
lot of that. So to keep people in those deals, or they won't have that ability to do that because they can't go back to their investor. Well, some people are flush with cash and have a fund or a REIT or whatever, they can handle that, right? But if those smaller investors that syndicated and they have to go back and do capital calls, that's not going to be the best. You know, hey, we're in this deal and we can't get out of it. Oh, by the way, we need another, $1 million so we can stay in it. Aren't you glad you invested in my deal? Like that's not going to work.
Right.
So, I find it super interesting
It is.
to see where we're at, right? But there's a ticking time bomb. It's this year, next year, right? And then 26, between 2024 and 2026, we just have a ton of debt that's maturing.
Right.
And, and so now you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we navigate this one?
You
Right?
know,
Without,
what's interesting too is that people don't talk about this. I don't know why. Well, I kind of do know why. It's not meant to be talked about, so to speak. But look at the federal debt load. Look at our debt service. We're paying $1 trillion a year to service our debt, just to service our debt. And
yeah,
what happens? People don't realize that the debt, basically, the way that it works is that this debt was essentially borrowed at certain rates with certain terms, and as those terms mature, it's like anything that it has to be replaced. So the debt is being replaced with higher rate debt, and
yeah,
that's a problem. So I don't think that our government, or our unless we continue to raise the debt ceiling until up until it hits Mars, right? Which maybe we will. We can't sustain this type of debt service, and the only way to soften that blow is to lower interest rates. So it's got to happen.
yeah. At some point, when they kill the inflation beast, I think they're more scared of inflation than they are this other. I don't know why they're
Yeah, I
so.
don't know why either. I mean, you know what?
Yeah,
And I know it sounds callous, but the real middle and lower class America is who hurts from that, because they
yeah,
don't have disposable income. And when the
right.
costs of living goes up like that, it hurts. But I don't know that it hurts, more than keeping interest rates elevated.
Yeah, I know. I think it's the biggest thing is with our wages keeping pace, right? If wages are keeping pace, then people can absorb the cost, differential but I think what they're starting to see is now wages aren't, right? I think that's what they've
They're
been
not.
they're
And,
not.
and the other crazy thing is that raising interest rates actually impacts inflation. It raises
Yeah.
inflation. Why?
Yeah.
Because now it costs me more to go lease a truck. It costs me more to
Yes.
rent a house. It costs me more to pay a mortgage. And guess what? Every single company, every major corporation, they have to increase their, now here's where the inflation
Yeah.
really kicks in. They have to increase their prices. And at the end of the day, the consumer always foots the bill, because if it costs Apple 30% more to make their MacBook Pro, because parts have gone up and labor has gone up and all these,
Right.
everything has gone up. Guess what? Now the consumer has to spend more money. So
Right.
I
I
don't
know.
think it's the solution. People discount that. They don't think about that.
Well, I mean that they want to push it to where it hits the breaking point, right? So that it will, I mean, they want job layoffs. It's basically they don't consider it a recession until there's unemployment. And if
Right.
there's
Which
no
the labor
unemployment,
market has been hot.
I know. And so that's why I don't think the rates are coming down, because I think until you see massive layoffs and there's this hurt in the market, unemployment wise, and then they'll go, okay, we've reached it. We've hit the where we think we needed it to get to, so we can cool it off a little bit. And it's that balancing act. But that's what they've been waiting for. And they've been getting too much good and employment news. Like
I
it's just,
know.
we're still hiring. And so they're like, well, shit, we haven't done it yet. And so then they have to keep, that's why they're not gonna move it until there's massive layoffs and there's unemployment rises like 200 basis points or 300 basis points where they see that they've made an impact. We're gonna hang out in this grossness, and it's gonna be until they can feel it. And I don't know, I don't know, but it's the one playbook they have. That's it. This is their
Yeah.
one playbook, and they got one play in that playbook, and that's it. This
Yeah.
is all they know how to do. And I'm just like, okay, all right. So, as a commercial real estate owner, and everybody's trying to navigate this myriad of grossness that we're all sitting in, our margins are smaller. Everything's still, so I think for you, retail, especially if that cap rate and interest rate thing is still robust like that, I think you'll probably have a lot of people chasing
Yeah. No
you.
doubt.
Sure. I mean, it's not happening in multifamily, that's for
No.
sure. The only thing that works as a multifamily is, affordable because it's subsidized, or luxury. That's the only one that's
Yeah.
making sense, right? So then, but still, the insurance costs for all of that stuff is way too high. It's still affecting everybody's margins, but there's people that can make sense of it and they still want to build.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no,
That's the beauty of shopping centers, is that in many cases, the leases are actually triple net leases. They're not gross leases. So,
Yeah.
and if they are, they can be converted. So the
Yeah.
landlord, if he or she has an increase in insurance, depending on how the way the lease is written,
Pass it
it might
on.
just be the tenant's responsibility to,
Yeah.
for their pro rata share, which, by the way, what does that do on a side note? That
Yeah.
passes the
That's
cost
on to
along
the
to the
consumer.
consumer.
Yeah, it does for sure. It does. I don't know. That's like over my pay grade. I can talk about it, but I don't know if I could like make the call. I don't think I'd make the call. I think we would be like, I don't know what we would do.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not a Fed chair. That's all I'm saying. I was like, I'm glad I'm
Yeah,
not a
no
Fed
kidding.
chair because everybody loves you or they hate you. There's no in
Right.
between. There's like, no, we hate your guts. No, we love you. It's awesome. The economy's great. Like you're taking, credit for the economy when it has you have nothing to do with it. Like, the only time you're doing anything is when you're trying to stop or change something or
Right.
whatever. They're
Exactly.
the police, they're the Fed police. Anyway, but no, this has been awesome. So talk about what you're seeing as far as any new trends in retail or anything like that you're kind of seeing. Is it they're becoming more mixed use spaces? I mean, I knew a friend that would basically they were redoing the shopping centers and making them kind of like putting multifamily on top and doing some of that kind of stuff. I don't know if you're seeing any of that or talk about what you're seeing.
Yeah, so trends in retail, definitely seeing a right sizing or downsizing of spaces. A lot of single tenant, retailers. Walgreens, for example, is a great one. They're downsizing from their typical 13 to 15,000 square foot, a main on main corner lighted intersection box, just huge box, to 2,500, 5,000, 7,000 square foot Cooper concept, much smaller, more modern looking, maybe mid block, often mid block. We're seeing a lot of the quick service restaurants being, downsizing their footprint. Definitely seeing a lot of integration for the retailers with digital services, whether it's delivery, having, more of an integration with Uber Eats and Grubhub and those types of services, even having dedicated spaces for those people to pick up their orders. We're seeing, single drive-through lanes being converted to double or triple drive-through lanes, emphasis on speed, getting people in and out, less of an emphasis on indoor seating, which is great for the developer, right? Because, these deals, it's not based on a price, really a price per square foot. It's based on, as you alluded to earlier, Amy, it's based on, rent and a cap rate, right? So
Right.
rent is going to be determined by the tenant and the developer or the owner. Cap rate is dependent on the market. But if you can lower your square footage from 3,000 to 2,000, your
Mhm.
costs can go down significantly. You can still sell that building for the same price, right? So that's kind of cool. I like that a lot. I like this. I'm a fan in general of things evolving and driving towards a place of increased efficiency, which we're definitely seeing in the commercial sector.
Mhm.
I think that, what other retail trends are we seeing? Definitely, there's been a lot of closures of large, over leveraged and inefficient chains. Bed Bath and Beyond is one. Red
Yeah.
Lobster just filed for bankruptcy. But
Right.
again, to keep things away from the fake news perspective, we'll just look at numbers. People are saying, "Oh, look at all these closures. Look at all this bad news in retail." Guess what? This year, for the third straight year, we're going to have more store openings than closings. That's a good thing, right?
Okay.
A retailer like Bed Bath and Beyond or Red Lobster, these are in general, they're outdated, right? The evolution of retail says that those that are not performing will go the way of the dinosaur, and at the same time, we're having, more that are coming up than that are closing. So I think that that's a good sign, and I love it. I love seeing it in retail. I mean, retail is alive and well and thriving.
Yeah, I think it's just changing, right? I was at ICSC, I'm sure you were, and it was busy, and it was, there was a basically kind of the rumble was, yeah, retail is still alive and well. It's just changing how it's performing, like it's changing
Yeah,
what the experience looks like. It's changing how they serve the customers, and yes, they're typically obviously hybrid, they're hybrid retailers, right? So they're what do they call them, omni channels or whatever. But
omni-channel.
they're like, okay, we have an online presence, we have a delivery, we have to have a delivery space, right? And we also have a good retail in-store experience. We have to have
Yep,
all three, right? And so, and
yep,
then they're all sometimes those are conflicting, and sometimes those are different kind of modalities almost like, your delivery and online stuff is all about convenience and whatever. And then your in-store is all about how can I keep you to stay here longer? It's all about experience. What can I do? How can it flow? What can it look like so you can hang out longer and spend more money? Right?
Yeah,
It's really kind of interesting to see. So you almost have two stores in one, like one which is very focused on convenience and efficiency, and the other one's like all about experience and hospitality. It's really kind of a dichotomy that the retailers have to go through now, which I think it's really interesting. Like,
absolutely. And what we're learning is that, online generally doesn't work, online only, for a few reasons. I mean, number one, your cost of customer acquisition through, things like advertising is very, very high. And number
right.
two, returns just eat away at your profit margin, right? You buy something online, you don't like it. Sometimes, you know what? Sometimes, listen, here's an example, great example. My wife cannot find the strollers that she likes in person, right? So what is she going to do? She's going to buy two or three of them and return one or
Yeah,
two of them. Can
right.
you imagine the cost to the retailer in that transaction?
Yes.
They're hard pressed to have a profitable transaction that way. That's why things like buy online, pick up in store, or BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store, has become so popular because the retailer, they don't want, the
They
cost
don't deliver it to you.
yeah, they want you to come get it. So I'm going to buy online, pick up in store, return in store. That's what the retailers want. They don't want to have to absorb the shipping costs both ways. So what we found is that the brick and mortar is really essential to the retail experience. And it goes the other way too, right? Like sometimes we'll go to a store and do some shopping and then buy online because it's a better price. So it's really interesting because they are really working in tandem to provide not only a better customer experience, but a more efficient experience. Because again, what's going to happen? What if the returns eat into the profit margins for the companies? Who's going to pay for that in the end? It's going to be
Yeah,
the consumer. So it's
yeah.
important that we have a streamlined and efficient process for the consumer and for the retailer.
Yeah, you know what was so funny? I was at a CVS. I'll tell you a story. It's a squirrel moment. I'm squirreling. I was at a CVS the other day and didn't have my wallet, right? And I was, and for some reason, I could my Chase card wasn't attached to my Apple Pay, right? So I
Right.
couldn't pay for anything. So what did I do? I walked around the store, ordered online, and
Yeah.
then walked out of the door, came back in and picked it up. Because they basically
Oh, that's
they had
funny.
a pickup service,
That's
right? So
funny.
I shopped in the store, ordered it online, went across the parking lot, grabbed a coffee, came back and picked it up
That's funny.
because I didn't have my wallet.
There you go. That's funny.
But I mean, like if they didn't have that ability for me to do that, I would have been stuck, right? I was like,
Yeah.
but maybe that would be, you're ordering online, but you're not really sure if that's what you want, right? So maybe you can just do it that way. But yeah, that was my experience because I was like, damn it, I'm like, crap, I didn't attach my Chase card and I was trying to fix it and it wasn't working. It's like, nah, screw it, I'll just order online,
That's
go
funny.
grab a coffee, come back and pick it up.
That's funny.
I know. It's hilarious. So yeah, and I was just like, and it was super easy and convenient. They had my little bag waiting for me, and I'm like, here you go, here's stuff. All right, thank you, see ya. No, it was
That's great.
great. Yeah, it was like weird. It was a weird moment, but it's a retailer story for
Yeah,
sure. I don't know. It's
absolutely.
so crazy. So do you think and I this whole story about brick and mortar versus online, I mean, Amazon is not fully online, right? And Amazon has stores. They bought Whole Foods, they have Kohl's, they have all these other different things. So if everybody thinks that Amazon's just online, well, forget it. Forget about it. It's not. They have their brick and mortar stores too, right? And so I think it's kind of interesting that you're going to have kind of a both kind of situation. I don't
Yeah.
think it online ever goes away. I think it just serves
No,
a purpose, right?
sure, absolutely. And it
Yeah,
captures a certain portion of our purchases, which are impulse purchases, right? Because if I have a desire to buy something, but it requires me to get in my car and drive somewhere, I
yeah,
might not be in the mood. But if I just click a button and my credit card's already stored and it's at my doorstep literally 12 hours later or eight
yeah,
hours later sometimes,
right.
online captures that impulse. I'm not saying it's a great thing for society, but I
Yeah,
understand why it works from a business model perspective.
yeah, for sure. If you're busy and you can't drive anywhere or, or whatever you got going on. I mean, I love that. I mean, I use Instacart. I don't grocery shop anymore. I use Instacart.
Nice.
I mean,
Yeah.
Like it used to be, oh man, I got to go to the grocery store. And now I was like, oh, hell no. I Instacart everything and it just shows up and it's magical and it's there. And I'm like, great, this is awesome.
Nice.
And I get, keep using my different email address. So I get 2 weeks free delivery. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you're not.
No, I'm running out of email addresses.
That's funny.
I'm actually gonna have to pay for delivery eventually. Oh, Instacart, I hope you're not listening. Everybody's listening to me. No, I'm just kidding. That's so funny. Well, this has been such a cool conversation, man. This is great. So what
Yeah.
else are tools of or, you know, pearls of wisdom do you think is gonna happen in the next couple of years? Pull out your crystal ball.
I
What do you
mean,
think?
listen, I would just say for all the people out there that are watching or listening, there's great opportunity right now. I'm watching clients who are getting involved in repositioning of vacant assets or buying deals that have short term remaining and then repositioning them, or buying shopping centers, repositioning the shopping center. That's a whole nother, we
Yeah,
could talk about that for hours. There's opportunity, and you have a situation where a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines. So I would just say that if you see an opportunity, run and go for it and grab the bull by the horns. And I just know that that saying, grab the bull by the horns, at the end of the day it's still a bull, right? But at least
yeah,
you're grabbing it by the horns and
yeah.
taking that opportunity and seeing success. So I would just say that that's really important. And if there's anything I can do to help out, I love talking to people who are in the industry or want to get in the industry or need advice or anything like that. So please consider me a resource in any way that I can be one.
If you were going to talk to somebody about like they're transitioning over into retail, like say they're a multifamily investor or a single family
Mhm.
residential investor and they got means and they can
Yeah.
go buy a small shopping center. What is the like if you were to give them like 2 or 3 tips of like this is what you need to do? I mean, I'll obviously use a smart broker, that's number one. But like what do they need to look for as far as, because it's different, right? It's a different kind of asset class. So what do you think?
Yeah, so it really depends. I can't give a blanket statement for that because it depends on the investor appetite. If you're someone that doesn't mind, rolling up the sleeves a little bit and, doing some value add stuff, I would say go out there, buy a shopping center like you had said, Amy, talk to me, or someone like me. And if you're gonna buy a shopping center, maybe buy something that's a little bit distressed, has a little bit of deferred maintenance, maybe has some bad tenants, maybe has some tenants paying below market rent, maybe has some vacancy, maybe has some gross leases where the
Mhm.
tenants are only responsible for rent and you have to pay for all expenses in the center, so that you can convert those to triple net leases, which will lower your cap rate, increase your NOI, which is a win-win. So I would just say that, shopping centers present an opportunity that is most similar to multifamily insofar as you can force appreciation. So there's a great opportunity there. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to help, not only help you find the right property, but give you guidance on what to do to take those steps to force that appreciation and increase the value.
Yeah, that's awesome. So looking for something with a gross lease that you could turn into a triple net is like a
For
no-brainer.
example, yeah, absolutely. And also, look at like anything, location is paramount and super
Yeah.
important. So make sure that you have high traffic counts. Ideally, you've got great ingress and egress to get in and out of the center, good visibility,
Yeah,
strong population density, good household incomes. The
right.
things you can't change, make sure those are good. The things you can change, it's okay if they're not perfect, because you're going
Right.
to be the one who's rewarded for optimizing the center.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. That's awesome. Well, that's great. So
Yeah.
if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how could they do that?
Well, first of all, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post daily content there. So please follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me, send me a message, tell me, how that you heard me on this show. My first name is Dan, last name Lewkowicz, Lewkowicz. Again, Lewkowicz. Please reach out. Additionally, if you have a property, you want to know what it's worth, you're maybe thinking about selling a property, maybe you're looking at buying a property and you're looking at a deal and you want an extra set of eyes on it, even if it's not my property. If you're in commercial real estate or want to get into commercial real estate, whether it's investing or brokerage or whatever, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to talk and provide value in any way I can. I'll give out my direct cell phone. It's 248-943-2838. Again, 248-943-2838. Please reach out. I would love it. It would be my pleasure to be of assistance.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again for coming. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for,
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
yeah.